Hi everyone, this is Jim. I wanted to show you a game that was played recently at the Dortmund tournament that is going on now in Germany. This was played in round 4. With the white pieces we have Vladimir Kramnik, and with the black pieces we have Jan-Krzysztof Duda. So to give a little background, Jan-Krzysztof Duda is a young Polish grandmaster who won the Polish championship this year. And as far as I know, this is the first major international tournament, top-level international tournament that he's played in. So kind of a breakthrough opportunity for him. And he had a really good start. After 3 rounds, he was leading with 2.5 points out of 3. Kramnik, after 3 rounds, was only at 1.5 points, so he was a point behind. Although Kramnik has a history of doing very well at these Dortmund tournaments, so it's interesting to see how it will work out. Anyway, this game was played in round 4. And so Kramnik, being a point behind, is looking to turn the tables here, and he has the white pieces. He starts off with c4. Jan-Krzysztof plays knight f6. You get knight c3, e5, the reverse Sicilian, I guess, set up against the English. Knight to f3, knight to c6. And this is now known as the 4 knights variation, very cleverly named. So the 4 knights variation of the English opening. And we continue in the main line for a little bit. g3, bishop to b4. These are the main moves. Bishop to g2. And now d6. So d6 diverges from the main line. If we back up a step, the main line here continues castles, castles. And this is interesting, so I want to show this for a few moves more. Black pushes on at e4 at this point, and makes you wonder how this is going to work out. It's kicking this knight. It goes to knight g5, and for a second you might think white is going to round up that pawn. So black has maybe made a mistake in pushing it ahead so far, but it's black's turn. He takes off the knight and then plays rook e8, defending the pawn. So now the pawn can't be taken, and now you may start to wonder if white is maybe in a little bit of trouble because this knight doesn't have too many good squares. But the move here for white is f3, and so that gives this e4 pawn as a target for the knight and a landing square for it if it gets kicked. So anyway, this is an interesting and double-edged position. It was featured in the 1987 World Championship match between Kasparov and Karpov. Kasparov, with the white pieces, had this position twice, and he won one game and lost the other. So you can see it's double-edged. This was also played recently in the 2016 candidates match between Caruana and Anand. Caruana, with the white pieces, went on to win that game. So still a position being contested at the top levels. Anyway, let's go back to the game. It looks like Duda was trying to avoid some main lines, played a few moves in similar moves, but in slightly different order, to maybe avoid some theoretical preparation of Kramnik. Although we still are in lines that have been played before, so we're not totally off the beaten charts. We sort of wander in and out of various lines in the English here. And pretty natural moves. White goes d3. Black decides to go ahead and trade off the knight anyway. And then he does push on with e4, so it looks like this is still an idea even after white has played d3. It's certainly not very attractive in this position to take the pawn. Black will get a pretty good knight here unless there's some immediate tactic against it, and white will be left with these doubled isolated c-pawns. So so white doesn't take, but moves the knight, and now black can take. So he doesn't have to worry about the exchange on e4 all the time. And then he takes the knight off. And here he played d5. But let's pause and think about this position for a while. There's a little bit of something for both sides in this position. White has the bishop pair, and white has open lines. But on the other hand, he has kind of a messed up pawn structure with these doubled pawns. Black has a very solid pawn structure, but he's maybe lagging a bit in development, and his position might be kind of cramped. Maybe if white can get in the move d5 here, it might cramp black's position somewhat. So I think that's why black is motivated to play d5 immediately. But there are other ways to play this. He could just try for piece activity with a move like bishop to g4 here. Anyway, d5 was played. Kramnik continues with bishop to g5, pinning the knight, and Duda plays c6. So this is a position where we're out of the opening book. This position has been reached before, and h6 was played previously, which leads to a kind of funny looking position. After the exchange, queen takes back, and it's hitting the d-pawn here, but at the same time black's d-pawn is undefended. So the game went like this: black took, white took, and white took, black took, and then white played rook to c1. So there's a position where Chess Engine gives a slight edge to white. I think I like white here. White's a little bit more active. This position, this bishop is not yet developed, and it's not clear where it's going. There's pressure against the c-pawn, but at the same time, these pawns are isolated in the middle, and maybe black can get some pressure against them as well. So, interesting position. I suppose this bishop is going to come out to the f5 square and try and round up that pawn. But it's well, after rook c1, maybe this rook is also coming up here to chase the queen away. So anyway, the game continues from there. But that's not how Duda played. He went with c6. Now we're out of the opening book. Kramnik took, and this surprised me at first, but you know, I was thinking maybe it's an end game where you know, black has one pawn holding back two pawns and a passed pawn on the outside. So it looks like an endgame that would be favorable to black, but I'm not sure about that. I've been thinking about this some more. I mean, the usual strategy. Imagine all the pieces were gone, and we're just left with kings and pawns. The usual strategy would be for black to push these queenside pawns forward, create an outside passed pawn over here, and then draw white's king away. And then if white's king is drawn far enough away, black's king would come in and try and capture these pawns. But notice these pawns also control these squares, so white's pawns are seemingly blocking the access route that the king has to come in and get these pawns. It would actually have to come in on the light squares like this to try and round up those pawns, and so it's not clear if that would actually work as an endgame for black. And if black tried to come in on this side, you know, white's king would be over here defending against the passed pawn on this side. So white's king would be in a position to block his progress. So I can't, you know, my first impression looking at this was that this would be a winning endgame for black, but on second thought, I'm not so sure. Anyway, we don't get to an endgame. Kramnik keeps things exciting in the middle game. Let's see, he goes with queen b3 here, putting pressure on this pawn and looking at the b pawn as well, b6. So so this bishop won't be tied down having to defend the b pawn. Also, you know, the bishop could conceivably deploy along either of those two diagonals. Let's see, rook a to e1. Interesting choice of rooks, putting the a rook on the e file rather than the f rook. So now h6, kicking the bishop. Kramnik goes for the exchange. And black's queen comes out and is hitting the d pawn over here. So rook to e5 is played. It's a double-edged move. Well, a dual-purpose move, not double-edged, dual-purpose. It blocks the queen from looking at the d-pawn and is just going to win white's d-pawn. Actually, in this position, white could have immediately taken this pawn, and that would be fine for white as well. But this looks like the more conservative choice, right? Not trading pawns, but just trying to round this up with a minimum of counterplay for black. So black plays bishop e6, but he's just outnumbered here, and Kramnik could probably take that pawn at any time. He plays f4 here. Black goes with rook a to c8. So black is not content with just passively defending that pawn. You know, white was sort of allowing black the opportunity to play rook to d8 and just hold on to the pawn, and black chooses not to. Black chooses to play more actively with his pieces. So Kramnik doubles like this. Duda plays rook to c7, and now finally Kramnik grabs the pawn. So it's been hanging for a couple of moves there, but he finally cashes in And then he takes back with the queen, getting his queen to a good centralized location. So at this point, Duda decides to try and activate his rook. He plays rook to c2. And Kramnik offers a rook exchange by playing rook to e8. I think Kramnik is looking forward to the endgame at this point. With the heavy pieces and these two passed pawns in the center of the board, it looks like this is pretty favorable for white. In fact, the chess engine is giving white a pretty big edge already at this point. It thinks here black could try a move like g6, maybe try and give this king some lift here, maybe try and restrain white's pawns from coming forward. So it thinks this move, rook back to c8, is a slight mistake. It's kind of a forcing move, trying to round up this rook or drive it away or force an exchange. But Kramnik finds a nice reply here. He doesn't do any of those things, but he brings his queen in to defend the rook, and at the same time the queen is looking along the 7th rank here. So a good move from Kramnik. Duda plays rook to d8 to chase the queen away, and this does lead to exchanges now. Let's see, the chess engine here gives this line, rook c takes e8, rook takes e8, and g5. So just trying to, I guess sort of like the g6 idea, give a little more space to the king, but also at the same time try and undermine some things here with white's pawn structure. So, but it gives white an edge even in that line. But that's how the chess engine would play this position. Let's see, Duda continue with rook d8, trying to chase the queen away. But of course, Kramnik can just exchange here. And so Duda takes back with the queen, maybe hoping for some more exchanges and getting a rook. You know, if black can get a rook on the d file and stop these pawns, maybe he can hold the endgame. But Kramnik doesn't allow that. He just brings his rook in to defend the queen. So after any exchange here, the white's rook would be on the d file, and those pawns would be well defended. So Duda tried queen to c8 here. Yeah, as I mentioned, queen takes, rook takes is good for white. The chess engine actually gives queen to a8 as the best try here, but this still looks good for white. d5, g6, f5. These pawns just start pushing forward. You know, there's a threat to take here and open up the 7th rank, and this king will be mated shortly. So so white is using these threats, and of course this pawn here is hanging. So white is in good shape in this line, even with best play. Duda tried rook to c8. I wanted to mention here, there's actually an immediate threat. If black doesn't do anything, say just pushes a pawn, white can actually take here. A nice little tactic you should always look for. So the point is that the king can't take because it's defended, and if the rook takes, then you can take the queen. So anyway, Duda tried queen to c8, and at this point Kramnik just decided to trade queens and play king to f2. Notice that he's not even in any hurry to round up this free pawn over here, and he does allow black to get active, we'll see in the game, but he's keeping his rook on the 7th rank and trying to keep the king restrained. Duda tries king f8, and now he grabs the pawn. Let's see, if instead of king f8 he had played a6, this still works out pretty well for white. Say king f3, king to f8 now. The rook can run over to a7. The rook can come down to c2. This is how black activates with the rook on the 2nd rank. But after this exchange, the rook here is defending the a pawn, and white still has these passed pawns in the center, so there's still a winning position for white. So that was, here, cancel that. That was just best play according to the chess engine. Anyway, let's go back to the game. Black played king f8 immediately. The rook came over and grabbed the pawn. This rook comes down with check now, and so this black does activate his rook and starts to grab things along the 2nd rank. But now the d pawn starts marching forward, and this rook is no longer in a good position to stop it. Duda tries to play g5 here, and you know, if he can open up some lines, maybe this will enable him to bring his rook back quickly. But Kramnik just pushes with f5, and he goes f6. He doesn't want to allow this pawn to march in one step further, and that would also introduce mating threats as well as queening threats into the position. So he plays f6 to stop it. Now the d pawn marches forward once more, brings his king over to stop it, and white Kramnik puts his king on d4, an excellent square where it's shielded from checks. Also notice this pawn on g3 is controlling the h4 square, so the rook can't check from the side, and the king is shielded from the checks from behind. Let's see, Duda goes for counterplay with h5. King marches forward to d5. Duda plays b5 here. The king goes to e6. Now rook e2 check, driving the king away from the pawn, but he grabs the f-pawn, and he plays h4. And now Kramnik comes up with a nice finishing move here. He played the move rook to e7 check, and black resigned. So this is a nice position, and maybe you might want to work out a few lines yourself. So I'll give you a few seconds here to pause the video and see how the game might continue if black had chosen to play on. Okay, yeah, pause the video if you want some time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away now. So black just resigned here, but if he had played, the exchange is forced, because if he just moves the king, he's going to lose the rook. So he has to take. After d takes, the king is blocking the pawn, and he can push his h-pawn forward. It's only 2 steps away from queening, and this king is too far away to stop it. So black is going to get a queen, but white is going to get something else. White plays king to e6, g2, f6. Notice that this king, after king g6, this king has no moves. And so black goes ahead and queens, but white mates. So black queens first, and white checkmates first. So anyway, after rook to e7 check, black resigned. So a nice game. I enjoyed that game and the finish. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.